I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition.
I met and worked with my next guest in a few corporate board meetings, and I found him to be a well-researched thought leader and skilled facilitator. And it turns out he believes that I do, that the mission of any organization can only be accomplished through collaboration, with each person bringing their unique and diverse experience, perspectives, and gifts to the work of the whole team. That there is a difference between understanding and agreement, that we often only seek agreement without understanding. And when we truly understand someone, we don't always have to agree though, we create the foundation for effective communication and trust. And that creating a common language with understood definitions lays the foundation for what we all want: connection with other people in respectful, expansive, and joyful relationships. Dr. James Pogue provides thought leadership for leaders and organizations to push them to address diversity, inclusion, and bias, also known as DIBs, directly and significantly. As the president and CEO of JP Enterprises, he has spearheaded the development of the DIBs Model, a critical component of the organization's work and success. An outgrowth of research and grounded in theory, this model spawned the DIBs Assessment, a tool used to measure where an organization, team, or individual is on their diversity journey, thus providing the best opportunity for strategic recommendations and change. Dr. Pogue is also the creator of the No-Nonsense Experience, a diversity discussion series that leverages cohort learning and emergent best practices to keep participants in, quote, the right kind of uncomfortable. Dr. Pogue supports leaders in making decisions that attract, engage, and retain talent at all levels, and deepens the learning around diversity, inclusion, and bias. Dr. James Pogue on the Business of Intuition. James, it's great to see you again, my friend, and to have you on the Business of Intuition. I just want to sort of start us off with this observation that over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, we have had an explosion of conversation around diversity and equity and inclusion and bias. It's just so many discussions, and we now have positions in companies that are being hired for that. You have a process that is really about diversity, inclusion, and bias. What is it? And how is it different than diversity, equity, inclusion? Give me your take on this movement.
So one, I agree with you 100%. I mean, it started a long time before a long time. Call it civil rights, call it affirmative action, call it EEO. It started then. This is the newest iteration. And I think it has a lot to do with there's still a need, right? And there's new groups that are making themselves know like, hey, we also need some attention. Hey, there's also a gap here. And not for nothing, there's groups that have always been here who have never been seen. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get a little further down. But to your point about what is the language that's being used, from 100,000-foot view, I, as a researcher, I, as a speaker, I, as a consultant and coach, I don't care what language you use. I think that deeper connections between humans make us better.
But let me just hold on a second. That's really an important point you just said. Language almost doesn't matter. Am I saying that correctly? Connection does?
Yes, and I don't care what language you use to get there. I don't care which acronyms you use to get there. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Replace that E with equality if you want to. Call it DIB, diversity, inclusion, and bias. Call it belonging. If the end result is about Dean and Jane being more deeply connected as colleagues, as leaders and followers, to execute work in a more expeditious way, this is the win. And I think that sometimes the language, the acronyms, keep Dean and James from being close, being able to discuss, being able to dig, being able to push.
And so so at what point does language become the problem?
Yes. The answer is yes. Language is almost always the problem, right? So if my team wins the culture war, if my team wins the actual war, and throughout history, what happens when you lose the war? The losers of the war, their libraries get burned down, their scholars get killed off, their language gets changed, their religion may even get changed. That's what happens when you lose. Some of us lost the battle or the war then, and now we are in that place of trying to say, okay, that happened then. Now we're all hopefully in a different place where we don't hate each other and trying to kill each other, really, like in a battle, like a war. Can we figure out how to get along better? And can we not use words as the new weapons of the moment?
So some would be listening to this and saying, we seem to have a preponderance of terms. And I'm confused. Like, I don't know what to say to whom. I don't know what pronoun to use. I'm in a new world. Is that a way of, I mean, you're saying, is that okay? Should we be doing that? Is the different terms for all these different things appropriate? Or is it also something that is creating division because of the fact that we have these words to describe our differences?
So again, 10,000 foot view, nobody reads anything anymore, as my grandmama says, right? And we can get flexed into all the words mean the same thing. Diversity means the same thing as equality, as inclusion, as, because we're in fast food mode when it comes to intellectualness. We are not in critical thinking mode when it comes to intellectual and words. So if I were to define them for someone, I would set the table before I even did so. I would say, before I go into defining anything, let's talk about why it's important to define. If we don't baseline language, then we can be having two really good people trying to solve a really important problem, speaking at cross purposes, because they're not using the same words to define the same thing.
So the baseline language then requires a definition regarding those words and phrases. So we might have, that's where bias comes in on anything. We all have a different reaction to this word versus that word, but if we all agree on what does this word particular mean, now we're connected.
Yes, we can have a great discussion, debate, if we can agree that 1 + 1 is 11 today. Then we can discuss it. But if I don't tell you 1 + 1 is 11, you think I mean it's 2. And now you just think I'm an idiot. But if I say, wait, hold on, for the purposes of today, for the purposes of this discussion, for the next hour, 1 + 1 = 11. Everybody, all hands in, 1, 2, 3, break. Now we can talk about it. In the absence of us having a shared language, we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. And so that it's not until I get people to agree with that I will then go forward to define what the words mean.
So you're saying create the shared language first and then define it second.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then we're off to the race.
Okay, got it. And the question is, does it continue to perpetuate that we're always changing new words and we're always changing the definition?
There will be new language. There will be new words that come out, right? So if I were to define diversity, I would say it's everything about you and I that makes us similar or different. Everything. Your height, your hair color, your favorite color, your birthstone. It all is diversity. Whether you're raised on a farm or whether you were raised in the city, it's all diversity, right? I would also say that there are some components of diversity that matter more than others, that have more impact in how you see the world and how the world sees you. For example, every day of the week, my age is way more impactful to how the world sees me and how I see the world than my favorite color. But both of them are diversity, right? I would say the same thing about religion. I would say the same thing about gender, sexuality. I would say the same thing about whether I was born in my geography, where I'm from, right? I would say the same thing about differing abilities or disabilities or accessibility, however you want to frame that family of activity. I would say the same thing about politics. I would say the same thing about all of these large areas that we call the DIBs or diversity, inclusion, and belonging, big nine. These are the most impactful areas of diversity in our life. It doesn't mean that the others don't exist and they're not important. It means when you rank what's more important, my gender, my age, etc., are more important than my birthstone.
Got it. So let me ask you, I'm going to get to that in a second. In your model, you don't call out equity. How come?
So I don't call it out. It's an awkward thing, but it's true.
It's not in your acronym.
Yeah, I needed an acronym that was easy to say.
Oh, fair enough. And that makes you unique.
Yeah.
But words are important to you, obviously. So
right.
Tell me more about that.
And so I encourage people to say, I do exactly what you just said. Where is equity? Where is that hanging out there?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think we juxtapose equity and equality, right? So equality is giving everybody the same thing. James is 5 feet tall. Dean is 6 feet tall. We both want to look over the fence to watch the baseball game.
Yeah.
The fence is 7 feet tall. We both get a 1 foot box. Dean can see, James can't. That's equality.
Mm-hmm.
Equity is putting us in a position where we can both watch the game. So I get a 2 foot box. You get a 1 foot box. We both enjoy the game and share a hot dog.
Right.
Now,
which is a very famous analogy.
The devil in the detail. Right. That's the difference in the definition. Equality is giving everybody the same thing. Equity is giving them what they need to be successful and to accomplish the task.
What is it that you then fall? Do you fall in line with the equity or what's your point of view on that?
I think it depends on what the people need. I think to treat James and Dean the same without knowing what they want and need is unfair, right? If Dean has farther to go in the race, or again, I just use the height as height again. If Dean is 6 feet tall and James is 5 feet tall, and the demand is you must watch the game, and you only gave me a 1 foot box, I can't see the game because the fence is 7 feet tall.
Right.
You can't expect me to be successful if you gave me the exact same thing you gave Dean.
And so equate the 5 foot person in a more tangible experience that we can put our arms around.
Sure.
So that we can go, I get the metaphor, I got a shorter person, taller person, we can't see, this person can see, give them a 2 foot versus a 1 foot. That makes sense. But translate that.
Sure. So James and Dean are both smart guys, got about the same IQ, take the test, our brains work about the same speed. But James does not speak English. Right? James does not speak English. The test, in order to be successful at this work product, we have to do it in English. We have to talk to our clients in English. We have to present this. But we both know we're equally smart when it comes to the math of what needs to happen. But the goal that the company wants of us is to be able to express that to the client, right? So let's assume this is a 100K job. It's an important job, big job we got going on. Now, Dean does not require you to teach him language or to have the time to learn language. I need the time to learn the language so I can execute on what you want me to do.
Fair enough.
And so that's the bigger box that I would get.
Got it. So Supreme Court, affirmative action, how does that relate to what you're saying?
Sure. So, again, paint with a broad brush, the affirmative action is supposed to help to level the playing field. Let me start with, it was flawed to begin with, right? Just like any other political machination, there was a lot of horse trading that went on to make this thing happen.
Sure.
Right? So it was a flawed and broken set of policies as soon as it was put in place, right? And there's an argument. Some people would say, look, it was supposed to initially be about people of color. And they inserted sexuality and they inserted gender, which pulled away from the people that were doing most of the protesting and asking and demanding. But okay, that's where we are.
Yeah.
Right? So then you start to have a different groups that say, well, because of this ruling, I'm not getting a fair shake. Those people over there are getting getting the equity box, the bigger box, right? And that's a reasonable conversation to have.
Right.
But the broader conversation is, do you want the smart people in the case of Harvard and North Carolina, do you want them to go to college and do well? And do companies want to hire the people with the biggest brains that are willing to work really hard at this thing? Answer, yes. Then come up with something better. We've had a long time to come up with something better. And I will tell you that my primary disappointment on both sides of the aisle are that they didn't come up with something better.
What could be something better?
Person too.
What do you think?
I think that you have to take the best of affirmative action. Does it or did it ever produce really talented people over time that helped to shape the nature of organizations, corporate monsters and entities across the world? Answer, yes. Okay. How did that happen and how can we make it more efficient? I think that we have to go back and look at the guts of organizations, say, how did it happen in, say, higher education is one place, but it's different when it happens at the hospital that needs to hire or the tech company that needs to hire, right? So there's an argument in the higher education space, post high school education space, as you may be aware, that do I really have to go to college to work at Google?
Right.
And do I need to get the right certifications, the right things, then head off?
Yeah.
So the affirmative action was developed underneath the model of high school, college, job.
Yes.
Not the model anymore. So what's the version of affirmative action, quote unquote, or the best practices of it that can be inserted in today's model?
Yes.
That's where we need the big minds of the world to be locked into a room like Apollo. These are the things you got. Now come up with a better solution instead of fighting about something that we know is flawed.
Yeah, I get
Everyone knows it's not the best thing. So can we what's the best stuff? So I think that that's where we would have to start. Is again, baselining the problem. We want the best minds, most dedicated people that are willing to do the work. We know that some of them have further to go because of how they were born or what has happened in our country and what has happened over time. It's okay. Maybe it's not okay, but it is what it is.
Yeah. But you make the point that I'm making the connection that the best minds who are willing to work hard will produce more, participate more in society and companies in which they're hired. And that's sort of the working backwards perspective. You've made the point, I've heard you say in the past, with things having to do with diversity and inclusion programs, to link it to the business, to link it to why we should be doing this from a business perspective. And I think that was a very unique take. Talk more about that.
Yes. In the absence of the business case, a business should not be doing anything, right? They have a business case for why they want to open up a new footprint over here versus over there, right? They have a business case for why they want to hire more accountants versus more marketing folks. Same thing should be held true of anything in the inclusion space. So what is the business case for any of this work? The business case is that if you have a more diverse workforce that is led by an inclusive leader, they come up with the best ideas. They are more productive and they are more profitable, period. And the data has been in on that for a decade plus. Any quick Google search, you see any number of Harvard Business Reviews. If you happen to like HBR, it's right there. If you like Wall Street Journal, it's right there too. Go to a think tank, it's over there too. Diverse team with inclusive leaders build better products. They're more innovative. They're more creative. Bottom line, they're more profitable.
How do you personalize that into a company? Because that's a great statement. Again, we can go find this research on our own. But if you were to work with an organization, can you translate that into their metrics or something that is tangible in terms of these products, these services, this retention, this healthcare costs that are going down? Can we actually map it back?
Yes, and I'll give you two examples because it's differentiated based upon the industry. So there's one group we're working with in the finance industry, and they happen to be a tax company, and they believe strongly, and I think probably rightly so, that they are meritocracy. If you are smart and you are capable, you will do well here. Full stop. So I asked them, okay, no problem. I can get with that. But are you being inclusive? Well, why should we have to be quote unquote inclusive? The best minds will end up doing well. And we are quote unquote inclusive. I said, well, prove it. Well, we recruit from the top program. Why should we recruit from Hispanic serving institutions 1, 2, and 3? Why should we recruit from historically Black college A, B, and C, tribal college A, B, and C, women's college A, B, and C? Why should we do that? Okay, I get your point. When I look at the top schools in finance, you're not recruiting from all 10, you're recruiting from 4 or 5. So you're not even being inclusive with the top school. So the meritocracy argument has holes in it. If you can blend meritocracy and inclusivity, you have the best opportunity at the best talent because you're going to where they are. Again, you got to go to where the minds may be hiding.
Yeah.
Right. So that you can educate them to do what it is you want and need them to do. And they will inevitably be much more loyal. And then that is that robustness of their dedication is what gets them to run through the fire.
Right. So somebody might be listening to this and go, hey, James, Dr. Pogue, it sounds cool. I think we're an inclusive company. I agree with you 100%. Move on. Right. How do I know whether I'm being inclusive? How do we measure inclusivity in an organization? Not just my bias that we are. Hey, I'm a good person. I love all human beings. I see you all as you are. I love the divinity of all people. How do we really know whether an organization is inclusive or not?
So have a step backward to go forward. So we know that we measure diversity, and it's fairly easy to measure diversity, especially for those things we can legally ask. How many people do we have that are male or female? How many people do we have from the north or the south? You can measure those things. Okay, great.
Right. Surveys and so forth.
Measure diversity. Now, inclusivity, we need to define it first. So inclusivity is the level of belonging in an environment. Do I feel like I belong to this organization? I belong to this team? Do I feel like I belong to Dean as my leader? Does he feel like he belongs to me as a colleague? Right? The level of belonging in an environment defined by its leaders, its key performance indicators, policies, practices, and procedures. Right? The level of belonging in an environment that is defined by its leaders, its key performance indicators, policies, practices, and procedures. So then becomes, how then, James, do you measure that stuff? All right, good question. So when we have something we call our inclusive leadership assessment, where we go in and we ask 2 buckets of questions. The first bucket is interpersonal questions about the humans that work in the place. The second set of questions we ask are around structure, the structural questions about the policy, the practices, the procedures, how work really gets done in this place. And we take a look at those pieces. And then our matrix allows us to measure where is Dean and where are James in their interpersonal inclusivity journey. A question might be, hey, James, are you comfortable mentoring, leading conversations around issues related to race or sexuality or differing abilities or geography, et cetera, et cetera? And maybe I'm feeling really good about race and gender, but sexuality, things that I'm not quite as comfortable there. Differing abilities. I got a couple colleagues that have autistic children that are on the spectrum. It makes you feel a little uncomfortable. I'm not all the way there yet. So I'm not there. That's fine, right? But you're the leader and you want to be great at all these things. I've not met a leader yet, and I haven't talked to all of them, but I haven't met a leader yet that says, I do not want to be an inclusive leader. Meaning, I just want to lead the people I want to. Most of the leaders I made, well, all of them so far have said, I want to be able to lead you regardless of who you are, where you are, what you believe, how you worship. You can follow me. I can help you get great at this job. Follow me, right? So we measure the interpersonal side and see where Dean is and where James are. And then we say, well, where would you like to be? Because if you really want to be able to lead everybody, but you're in a place where when it comes to differing abilities and accessibility, I struggle, now we can put together a roadmap to get Dean and James from where they are to where they want to be.
And you do it that sequence. You start with where they are versus work your way backwards. I mean, where do you want to be versus, so that's the process. Step 1 is current. Step 2 is desired future.
Yes. Well, and step 0 is baseline all the information. So we're speaking the same language.
Got it. Yeah, good. Yeah, I understand that.
Right? And we do the same thing with the structure of the organization. We take our HR team, or our people practice team, and we go and we take a look at your hiring manuals, your recruiting processes, your promotion information, all of that. We take a look at and see how are you structurally when it comes to inclusion? Because remember, we can measure this by looking at our policies, practices, and procedures. Right? We had a client one time that until they had 3 ladies pregnant at the same time, didn't know that they did not have a maternity policy. They had a disability policy that they had worked shaped into a maternity policy, right? And it took some digging to get there. And it's okay. I should have said this perhaps at the beginning. I believe strongly people are good people. I have positive intention. They want to do the right thing. It's the rare person who's out here trying to make people's lives a living hell, right? And they generally stand out. Most people are really good people. They want to do great stuff and they want to have a great organization. If they're a leader, they want to lead a great organization, right? They get to decide what great means to them, right? So you are here, you want to be great. The path in between where you are and great, that's the roadmap that we built for you. Same thing with your organization. Your organization is here. In order for it to be great, you just need to be over here. There's a roadmap in there. We build out that road.
Got it. So I think that some organizations that I've talked to, and probably you agree, would sort of take a look at diversity and inclusion as something to check off their box. Got to get it done. We're getting some pressure from our board, maybe some employee groups. We probably should take action on this. And it gets put aside on a separate sort of its own little domain, you know, like you would say that culture work or team building or these sort of activities, that's different from the business. You know, we need to do it, but, you know, it doesn't really connect. And of course, I've always seen that they are the enablers of the business. And so making that case is sometimes the challenge, is to see that this is all connected. You know, culture truly is, you know, how things get done, fueled by vision, process, behaviors, values, you know, those kinds of things. How do you make the business case that what you're talking about is not on some sort of little shelf that you check off into we're now done, that it becomes a part of and a function of your entire culture, which includes employee engagement and how you hire, how you mentor and coach, our processes and procedures that you've talked about. This is, when you really talk about it, we're talking on a massive OD level here and a whole philosophy. How do you make that case?
I think, again, I go back to the affirmative action part. That was one of the challenges of affirmative action. It was called a carve out, meaning that you're carving something away from the organization instead of cleaving it in.
Yes.
Right. And so what I end up doing is, and when I talk about these diversity, inclusion, and belonging big nine, when I introduce those to leaders, it makes it plain to them that it's not about them, it's about me, it's about us. Because if I'm just thinking race, or I'm just thinking sexuality, or I'm just thinking gender, those are often what people think is the big. Okay, maybe those don't apply to you because you're a part of the majority group, whatever that might mean.
Yeah.
Does geography matter to you? Where you're from, and have you been looked at differently or oddly or awkwardly because you're not from where these other people are from? What about your age? Right? Many of the leaders in our organization are a little longer in the tooth, if you will, than the people that are at the middle of the organization. Right? And they're being looked at a little strangely. Right? It was 7, 8, 10 years ago, millennials versus baby boomers was all over them. Right? And some of those baby boomers are the ones running the organization like, hey, show me some respect. I've been around. I understand how this works.
Right.
Millennials, like, part of the reason it's not working is because of you. In other words, it's simply because of my age that you see me as less.
Yeah.
So it's about making that connection, Dean, between the people that are the key decision makers and their interactions with belonging over time. You know, when I was coming up starting my journey I wanted to be a university professor. I wanted to be a university president when I was a young man. So I was working at universities, and we did some work in helping incoming college freshmen better understand how to avoid and prevent sexual assault. And one of the things we had to teach the young men was, as we were teaching them, it helped them to understand that it could happen to them. Not that it could happen to their mother or their sister or their cousin, but it could happen to them. That's when we make the difference. When we realize that it has happened to me, I am being biased against, right? And you know what? The person that did it, they're not terrible. But they did it. This millennial is not a terrible person because they think that I'm a bad person because I am older. They've been framed to think that way the same way we sometimes have been framed to think that these millennials are a bunch of entitled people. The only millennials I really know are the ones I'm related to.
Yeah.
Right? So my point is, it's about making it personal. It's about making it human. And it's about making it about the person that's in front of us. The work of empathy is required to be successful in the work of inclusion.
Good point. So you keep mentioning the big nine. What are they again?
So we've got gender,
Yes.
age, sexuality, race, geography, politics, religion. James. Politics, religion.
Yeah. Check on your website quick.
Geography and differing ability.
Differing abilities.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the bucket of what we used to call disabilities, but there's some funkiness about languages received.
I get it now. Okay.
Right?
Differing ability. Okay. And this is the framework, or this is the areas in which you use your assessment.
Correct.
Okay.
So Dean
Very
gets
good.
assessed across these 9. How's he doing with race? How's he doing with differing ability? How's he doing with sexuality? How's he doing with? And then he gets a report card, if you will. He's doing really well over here, needs some work over here. So when we come up with what his coaching plan is, his professional development plan is, it shouldn't be the same as Samantha across the street. It should be Dean's plan. Same way, we can take a look at the marketing team. The marketing team may be further along with this and not quite as far along with that. So you can come into this inclusion business with a scalpel and not a sledgehammer.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, it has to be at a point where the respondents to these questions in this assessment are really going to be honest. Because in some ways you might say, oh, I want to be seen. I'm going to play the system. I want to make sure that I come out with a good score, right? I'm going to figure out the way that I could have make myself look as good as possible. We have to get to that point where people are really honest about this.
Yeah, we do, and we're not, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So it's the job of the researcher to come up with a series of questions that cross-check one another, right?
Okay.
And to understand that sometimes people do want to make themselves look good, better. And so when we assess an organization, we flesh out the skeleton of the survey with meat and bones, meat and tendons and ligaments of interviews and focus.
Got it. So James, tell me about a client that is sort of like your ideal organization to work with. And if you have a story about, your interaction with them, the process, high level, where are they now kind of thing, the case study.
Yep. So we have an organization that they had a bump in the road, right? And the bump in the road, the story I'm telling now applies to about a dozen organizations. So the bump in the road could be a senior leader said out loud some things that really hurt some folks when it comes to the inclusion. Or they made a comment, they wrote something, etc. Or it could be that inside the organization, somebody filed a meaningful complaint that was representative of 15 complaints or 20 complaints, and they need to navigate that. Or it is that this organization is trying to get butts in seats to hire so they can grow, and they cannot find enough talent, or their talent is leaving and they don't really know why, or they know why and they need to be able to fix it. We're a STEM organization. We're losing a ton of our ladies to either entrepreneurial activities or they're going across the street. How can we get that? How can we become the organization of first? Well, again, we baseline the language, we execute the assessment, we take the picture of where you are, so this is where you want to be, build out that roadmap. And so the ideal client has a need that has an identified need that they see. And that need can come about because we're trying to grow. We don't have enough humans, or we're in a bit of trouble here internally, or one of our leaders may have tripped and fallen a little bit and said the quiet part out loud, right? But we want to get better. So I would say that's probably 85% of our clients.
And does that require the senior leader to be the champion behind this process?
It requires the senior leader to be on board with winning. And so they may not be, they have to be on board. When I say with winning, it's like, there are times I believe that CEO, they may not be on board 100% with this new marketing strategy, right? But they say, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this. I'm still kind of skittish about it, but let's go ahead and do it.
Right.
That's where they need to be.
So you could, at least they got one foot in the pool. We can get the rest of the leg and the body later, but at least we can keep working with.
Yes. There's a CEO that we're working with. There's no way that he's on board with everything that I might want to do. But but he wants to get as many talented people in his organization as possible. And he thinks that they've squeezed the water out of all the rocks that they've got. And if there's another way, I'm willing to consider it. Right? James, convince me quickly here, because I don't have a lot of time. Convince me why I should do any work with you. Why shouldn't we go over here and look at these other schools to recruit? Seems that we're doing okay. No, you're not, because you don't have enough people. And it can't be possible that all the smart people happen to be men. It just can't be.
Right.
So if you're 70-30 or 80-20 and the world population is 50-50, can we at least say that it could be 60-40? Right? Maybe, because 5% more is a huge win for your organization. Can we agree to that?
Yeah.
Right? Can we get a toe in the door? And if you can agree to that, all right, give me a little time to work here. And if I'm not convincing, then you should go get somebody else.
Yeah. Right. Good. What is something a person listening to this could do to build more awareness around this topic? Is there a question, an activity, a tip that they could noodle on as a result of hearing you today?
Yeah, I wrote an article on LinkedIn here recently, and it speaks to what I said about leaders, and that most leaders think they want to be inclusive. I realized, James, you've only spoken to the ones you've spoken to, and it's the minority of the leaders in the country, in the state, in the world. Maybe you're wrong. So here's a question. Do you really want to be an inclusive leader? Really? Who do you really want to lead? Really? And maybe they do look like you, smell like you, worship like you, live in your zip code. Okay. Maybe that's okay. Now you know. Then let's not play around with it. But now, does that allow you to win? Do the outcomes from that allow you to win at whatever the corporate or professional or healthcare related game you're trying to win at? Right? Because maybe, just maybe, today, you're not the most inclusive leader. I raise my hand first when I am asked, hey, James, have there been times when you have not been inclusive? 100%. 100%. And I recall when during the summer of 2020, when cities were burned up left and right, partially because of COVID, partially because we were locked in our homes, partially because of George Floyd's murder, partially, added up.
Right.
What were you doing? James I wanted to be around people who were like me.
Yeah.
And how did James define like me? Black men I went to school with. Small group.
Yeah.
Right? There's been a lot of women that have been good to me. There's a lot of white guys and brown guys been really good to you. Some of my best friends are white and brown guys. Why didn't I want to be around them? And it took a good friend, she's a she, who says, James, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing the same thing everybody else is doing, ma'am. I'm watching the country get burned up. This is not okay. She said, wait, hold on a sec. Shouldn't you be helping people? You consider yourself some kind of expert in this inclusivity business, maybe a podcast. Maybe you should write something. Maybe you should invite people to a conversation. We move in this space because of challenge and support. I was challenged into wanting to be by myself, the phase we call hesitant, be around people like me, by what was happening in the world, what was happening in my environment. I was challenged to get out of that by a smart lady I care a lot about, who cared enough about me to say, think about doing something different. Think about being better. Is this the kind of inclusive leader you want to be? So I would ask people to consider that. Do you really want to be an inclusive leader today? Your answer may be no.
Right.
Tomorrow it may change. Yesterday it may have been different. Who do you really want to be on a day-to-day basis when we do our affirmation? When we go to our houses of worship? When we look at our children? When we look at our spouses? Who do you want to be? What kind of husband do you want to be? What kind of wife do you want to be? What kind of father do you want to be? But are you that father every day? Are you that spouse every day? Nah, I'm broken. I'm a little wounded. My spouse something a little wonky, and I am not feeling her today. Right? I am not the best husband today. But overall, I'd love to be a great husband. Right? So the honesty of the self-reflection of can allow us help us, encourage us to get from here to there with help.
Yeah. James, I've seen you in action, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. I'm very impressed by your work and your delivery. There's not a lot of great facilitators out there beyond the topic, and you are one of them. How can people follow you, get to know more about what you're about, and maybe even connect with you to find out how they can engage with you?
Sure. So website is jamespogue.com. Nice and simple, at least I hope. I'm on LinkedIn, as my grandmother says, James Pogue, PhD on LinkedIn. Feel free to grab us there. And if you just want to send an email, info@jamespogue.com is how you find it, right? So yeah, just follow us, do all the things that people do in the social media world. And if you feel like there's a need or there's a question or something you want to follow up on, we're hanging around, love to help out. I do believe that I get to do a job I would do for free if the world was set up differently.
Yeah,
I would do nothing but what I'm doing now. And so for sometimes that means if somebody's got a conversation they need to have that, look, I just need to vomit out the poison of the moment. I get it. So we're over here for that. We've got your back.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.